up, guys? This is Tim with the Gutter Growth Podcast. Today I got a special guest. I got Jordan Thompson with Bluebird Capital. What's going on, Jordan?
What's going on? How you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. You give the audience a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jordan Thompson. I've been running and building businesses for about 15 years now. Got into the business world and home services. My first company was a pest control company. Had zero idea what I was doing in building a business, but me and a buddy started it. We ended up selling that company. We kind of thought we were hot stuff because our first company, we built and sold, and then went through about 6 or 8 years of just failing at many, many things. And then finally kind of hit on a couple things that work. But no, my passion is buying businesses. And we bought a gutter company years and years ago, and it kind of fell in our laps. We realized the gold mine that is gutters. And so we've been buying gutter companies ever since. So that's the quick. What's that?
That was your first purchase, a gutter company?
It wasn't our first purchase. Nope. It was about our third or fourth company that we had purchased. We had bought an insurance claims processing business. We had bought a metal fabrication company, several other, small-ish companies. And then a gutter company came up for sale in our local market. And I think it was this realization that a gutter company, really? But then we started digging into it. Yeah, we started looking at the numbers. We were like, oh man, this actually really makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we bought it, and then our eyes were seriously just opened a couple weeks into it. We didn't even realize what we had bought. I think we just thought it was going to be a good cash flowing company. And so since then, we've made 5 more acquisitions, expanded into two extra markets. And, we're kind of all in on gutters, and all of it up to this point has been privately funded, our own capital. And we're to this point where we recognize that we can do it at a bigger scale. So We started Bluebird Capital in an effort to buy and scale gutter companies.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So that ended up being your favorite, the gutter company?
Oh, by far. Yeah. Oh, by far. Yeah. The other companies, we still own a lot of them. Or we've sold them, but it's man, we get excited every day to wake up and do gutters. And
so what was the reason? What made gutters more, appealing?
So first of all, it's a super simple business. And look, I am not the smartest guy in almost any room that I go in. And so I need something that I can wrap my head around. Gutters is something that you can wrap your head around. It's a necessary service that, people need this service. Otherwise their homes are going to fall apart. So we like the fact that it's a service that is absolutely necessary. It's pretty high on the non-discretionary spending, sort of scale. And so we love that it's needed. We love that it's maybe not recession proof, but definitely recession resistant. And we like the fact that there's not a lot of attention around gutters. In the PE world, in the business buying world, or the gurus online, everyone's talking about plumbing, HVAC, electrical, roofing, e-commerce, whatever it might be. Nobody's talking about gutters. So we feel like we're kind of in this first wave of where the gutter industry is going. And you guys are doing a great job in helping grow the gutter industry as well, Tim. But it's relatively unknown in this world of big PE. And so, and I wish I could say that we forecasted all this and we knew all this, and that's why we got into it and bought our first gutter company. But the reality is, man, it fell in our lap, and we've been able to take advantage of it since.
Yeah, man. I fell into the gutter industry myself. I didn't even know what a gutter was when I started. But it ended up being a good business, and so I was just all in from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, we have kind of unique backgrounds because of that. I think a lot of people in the gutter industry, and rightfully so, they came up, they got a job as an installer at 20 years old, and then they went out on their own. They started a gutter company. We've got a little bit of a unique.
So this is what I found. Okay, so you're telling me my clogged gutters caused all this? I had no idea.
Yeah, unfortunately, most homeowners don't think about their gutters until this kind of stuff happens.
Wow.
Prevent unexpected and costly damage from clogged gutters. Protect your home with One Gutter Guard, the trusted solution for gutter protection. Call us today to find out why more homeowners are choosing One Gutter Guard.
Bit of a unique perspective where our background's more in like business and how to run a business, and we happen to get into gutters.
Yep.
And so, when we partner up with people or look at companies who are really good at the gutter side of things, and we can kind of help with the business side of things, it makes for typically pretty great things.
And I sold a company, but I'm just curious, what is it that you look for in buying a gutter company? Like, what type of gutter company is like, I would purchase that one versus I wouldn't purchase it?
Yeah. So the gutter industry, as you know, Tim, is super fragmented. So there are a lot of small, what we call mom and pop shops, single owner operator. Maybe he's running one or two trucks, or maybe on the truck himself. But there are there are much less companies that are run like some of these larger companies, where they have management and they have sales managers, right? And they have operations managers. And so we really, really look for companies that are of decent size, that are producing really strong, predictable revenues. And so revenue is one of those things that, as we know, it can kind of hit or miss on a year-to-year basis. But if you've got a predictable way of producing revenue, that's one of the first things that we look for. We look for companies that are well run. And what I mean by well run is like, do you have standard operating procedures in place? Do you have some sort of system that is replicable? Or if you as the owner leave on vacation in Mexico for 5 days, does the whole company fall apart?
Yeah.
And look, it's nobody's fault, but that's pretty typical in the gutter industry. It's hard to get to a certain size where you can hire managers and you can kind of push past that. But, through a lot of trial and error and a lot of money experimentation, we've recognized and kind of learned what grows gutter companies well. The other thing that we look for is clean financials. And this is something that I cannot tell you is really, really basic, but we run into all the time, where a company just has either no financials or they're really, really scattered financials. So if you'll just keep basic financials, keep a solid P&L, keep a balance sheet, make sure your tax returns match your P&L, that goes such a long way. We run into companies all the time where we're interested in buying them. They're interested in selling. They're in a great market. For all intents and purposes, it would be a great deal, but we just cannot get a value on the business because they don't carry books. They're like, well, I got some spreadsheets and I can show you my bank statements and I know I make a lot of money, but it's like, man, I can't do anything with that,
Yeah.
So
bookkeepers are cheap.
I know. Yeah. With the advent of like Upwork, for example, I mean, you can pay literally $400 or $500 a month or less to just keep clean books. It's not that hard.
So on Upwork or Fiverr.
Yeah, exactly. Get a freelancer. You don't have to hire it in-house, but just keep clean books,
What's the revenue amount? Like, it's like, this looks like a company I might look into. Is it like $1 million or 2 million or?
Yeah. So we look for companies that are between 1 and 5 million in what's called total enterprise value. And so the company itself is worth somewhere between 1 million and 5 million. We found that any less than that, it takes so much work and manpower to get it where it needs to be. If you're in that 1 to 5 million range, usually you have some staff around you. We really can't buy just single owner operated companies unless it's a company where we already own another company in that market, right? And we're just bolting it on. Then we'll consider those. There. Yeah, exactly.
Are you doing that? Like trying to pick up a bunch in a certain area?
Yeah. So our primary test market was we're out of Boise, Idaho.
Okay.
And that's where we've made several acquisitions just in this market, actually. At a certain point, we're kind of reaching to the we're at capacity. I would say we probably won't buy any more in this market,
Right.
but yeah, it becomes super profitable for us when we can take our operation, for example. We already have all the operating expenses built into what we're currently running, and then we can buy someone's 750 or $1 million in revenue and just bolt that onto our existing operation. The vast majority of that profit goes straight to the bottom line because we already have the operating expenses accounted for.
Oh,
So
yeah,
that's been a model that works really well for us. Go into a market, buy a larger company, or start greenfield a market, and then bolt on smaller companies around it.
So in that case, you might do something that's more owner operated and, maybe not as big.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Those bolt-on acquisitions can be a little bit smaller, but in general, we're still looking for that 1 to 5 million in enterprise value. And that means that a company's generally making in profit somewhere between 300 and $1 million or $1.2 million in net profit. That generally kind of puts you in that $1 million to $5 million range in total value.
Okay. So say if a company was doing like 300 to 500,000 profit per year on their P&L, what would a company like that be worth? And I know there's that's involved, but
for sure. So I get this question all the time. I get on an initial call with the seller and they're like, "What's my company worth?" And I'm like, "Well, I can give you a rough idea, but obviously there's so much that goes into it." A couple of those, like a lot of the big factors that determine where a company's worth are like, obviously, what are your assets? Do you have a bunch of trucks that are 20 years old? Are you sitting on a bunch of inventory that you're selling with the business? How predictable are your revenues and how predictable is your cash flow? Have you been doing 100,000 in profit and then all of a sudden you did 500,000 in profit one year? Like that's a little bit, suspect. So how predictable are your revenues and your cash flow? Are you growing year over year, or are you kind of like this?
So
but in general,
number, if they're not showing like some consistency, like over 3 years or so, that's a red flag.
Generally, yeah, because either you had a really great year because maybe the economy was good, or maybe the storms were really good that year, but you don't really have a predictable, replicable way to let me know as a buyer that it's going to continue on if I buy that company, right? That's all we're looking for as a buyer, is the predictability of my investment. So if I put X amount of dollars into this, can I expect X in return? Yeah. And if that's not super clear to me and predictable, then I'm going to kind of get scared away a little bit. But in general, a company is typically worth, at least the size that we're talking about, 2 to 3, maybe 3.5 times multiple on their net profit. And so if a company's making, in your example, 300, 400, 500,000 in profit, we're going to take that number, multiply it by 2, 2.5, 3, whatever it is. And that kind of spits out a pretty general number of what it's worth, again, with all those factors.
And then you'll add in the assets on top of that, probably the asset value.
So the assets are generally included in that price. Okay. We don't look at them separate. And the reason why is because those assets are only there to produce the income that the company makes. So if those assets were removed,
you can't make any
income. Right, exactly. So those are generally included, but that is a big factor in that sliding scale of maybe a company that would be worth 2 or 2.5 versus 3 or 3.5.
Mm-hmm. What steps do you say someone's they're just getting out 2-3 years in, they're still wearing all hats, they're only doing maybe 4, 5, 600,000 a year. What steps do you think they should take to get it towards being a sellable business, say if they had like a 5 or 10 year goal?
Yeah, the best thing that a business owner can do is build their company today as if they're going to sell at some point in the future. And so what I mean by that is you may not have plans even to sell your company in 3 years or 5 years or 10. Maybe you do. Maybe you want to pass it down to your kids. Regardless, though, you want to build the company so that one day you could sell it. And so, there's several things that an owner can do, and I'm happy to run through some of them. But the more an owner can remove themselves from the day-to-day operations of the business, the better that business is going to be looked at. So if I have to buy a business and I have to replace one person who's doing all the sales, answering all the phones, doing all the invoicing, doing all the bookkeeping, laying out the schedule for his installers, or maybe even doing some installing, that one person I have to replace with 4 or 5 people. Yeah. That's going to be really, really hard for me to make any money back, frankly, if I buy that business. And so removing the seller from as many day-to-day operations as possible is huge. That doesn't mean you have to go sit on a beach and never work in your business, but it does mean you need to delegate some of the things to other people. The other thing is again, like we talked about, keep really good books. One thing that we see all the time that's kind of a pitfall for potential sellers is they'll show X $300,000 in profit on their profit and loss statement, on their internal books. And then their tax return shows a loss of $300,000 because they wrote off a truck and they put a bunch of personal expenses through the business and whatever they could to not pay taxes. Yeah. And I get that, right? I'm the last person that wants to pay taxes. But in the couple years leading up to a sale, if you will just bite the bullet and pay the tax man so that your tax returns match your profit and loss statements, ultimately that's going to make your multiple go up, and you're going to get so much more value out of your company if you'll do that.
Another thing people don't think about, and I didn't really.
Basement flooding, roof leaks, mold. No. I have to clean the gutters.
Go back to sleep, honey. We installed one gutter guard.
Prevent unexpected and costly damage from clogged gutters. Protect your home with one gutter guard, the trusted solution for gutter protection. Call us today to schedule your free gutter inspection and estimate.
Really think about it until I found out, but all those write-offs that you're doing on your vehicles like that, if you sell the company, that all comes back to you on the taxes. And so you're going to end up paying that later anyways. So it's almost better to pay it now so that when you sell, you're not paying extra taxes.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Most people don't think about it. It's accelerated depreciation. It doesn't mean it's a free write-off forever. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's just like buying time.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. And most of us as business owners, we don't think about that. We see $100,000 tax bill and we say, how do I get out of this? I don't want to pay this.
And the accountant just wants to look good. So he's, that makes him look like a saint, Yeah,
that's exactly right. Hey, look what I did for you. You didn't pay any taxes this year. But, the catch-22 is now my business looks like it makes no money and I can't sell it. Right. Yeah. So it's difficult. Put in those SOPs though, standard operating procedures, track your numbers. This is another one that I see, that most business owners, and frankly, I didn't do this for a long time, but track numbers. When I go in to do due diligence on a company, I have some pretty specific questions that I like to ask. And I would say 9 out of 10 owners don't have the answers for me. What are you might know kind of what you're charging per foot, for example, on gutters for 5 versus 6 inch, but you don't know what your booking rate is. You don't know what your close rate is for your sales.
They're having the KPIs in order.
Exactly. And track those on a week-to-week basis. And again, in this whole idea of building a company that is sellable, the whole idea of it is you may never sell, but guess what? You're going to build a company that is so much better run today and frankly, better run without you. So you can go on vacation and take some time off. And then things aren't going to fall apart. So you're better off building it today as if you're going to sell. And so what we do in all of our companies, for example, we have a weekly meeting with all of our managers. And in that weekly meeting, we go over all the issues in the company. We go over our, what we call rocks, which are like quarterly projects we're working on. Yeah. And then we go over our KPIs. We have 10 or 15 KPIs that we track on a week-to-week basis.
So what are the most important ones?
Yeah. So we track total revenue for the week. And again, so this is on a week-to-week basis. So the previous week we track total revenue. We track accounts receivable. We need to make sure that our accounts receivable aren't bloating. We track cash balance, how much cash is actually available to us in the bank. We track what is our close rate for sales that week. We track what is our booking rates. Are we actually converting calls into estimates? We track what was our cost per lead, what was our net volume per lead issued. So I gave this estimator 10 leads this week. How much revenue did he bring back for those 10 estimates, for example?
You're doing this weekly.
We do it every single week. Yep. And here's kind of the framework that we look at it through. If I were on a beach as a business owner and, the Cabana girl came up and handed me a sheet, which is that KPI sheet, and I looked through it on a week-to-week basis, is there enough information on that sheet that I would either make the decision to keep sipping Mai Tais or fly back home because there's an issue? That's kind of the framework that we look at it through. And it's really important now that we're in multiple states and in multiple locations that we can do that because we're not there as the actual owners all the time to address
That's how you
issues.
read whether you needed extra attention.
Exactly. Yep. And then I should mention with those KPIs, there's goals. So, if we want to hit 2 million in revenue, for example, divided by 50 weeks in the year, what does that come out to on a week-to-week basis that we need to hit? And so we're looking at that on a weekly basis. And then if our revenue is low that week, we're talking about it. Hey, is there an underlying issue as to why we didn't hit our revenue this week? And we're talking through those things. I found that and again, this is really, it's harder to do when you're a one-man operation, but if you'll do it, you can kind of see the holes in your business and where you need to improve.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why we got VAs now that could do that stuff for cheap. So it's not like you might not have time to do it, but you could outsource that too for very minimal.
Absolutely. And no, you're exactly right. Yeah. For $500 a week or a month, even, you can have a VA pull all that data for you. I think that's the hardest part, Tim, is actually getting correct data. And we have worked for so many years to put the right systems in place and get the right softwares in place where we can actually get accurate data.
So, would you say if like a company really had their shit together and they're like, here's all my KPIs the last 5 years, like here, they had everything together, you would probably value that company higher?
100,000%. Absolutely. If we get into a scenario where we don't have to make a ton of changes, that company's absolutely worth more. If we can just put our manager in place, or even more ideally, keep the manager that's already there in place, and we can just throw some fuel on the fire to a really great foundation, that company's worth sometimes even double in cases than the company that doesn't have their stuff together, that just shows a number, top line revenue number.
See, it was easy for me to sell because I was personally done by 9 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't, that's only because I like showing face, but I had sales guys and I had the office, and it really wasn't much for me to do. Had about 4 or 5 crews at the time.
So what did you like about the process of selling, and what maybe did you not like?
I mean, it was definitely a learning process. And honestly, I'm just grateful that I had a chance to even do one successfully. Whether I feel that I could have done better or not, it's kind of irrelevant because I learned a lot through it. So like now I got several businesses. So I mean, I'm sure I'll sell something eventually, and I may want to get into the buying game one day. So it's just, I'm glad that I went through the process just so next time I'm not so ignorant on everything. It was definitely a big learning, situation.
Yeah, no doubt. And you don't know until you go through it, frankly.
You have no idea what to expect,
Yeah. And I know one thing we try to prepare our sellers for is, so we're going to get a deal in place. We're going to agree on terms. And then I have 60 to 90 days of what's called due diligence, where I'm going to peel back everything. And I'm going to make sure that there's no skeletons in your closet. I'm going to make sure that everything that you've represented to me is accurate. And I don't think people realize how grueling that process can be when you go to sell a business. So that's something that we try to get out up front. It's like, hey, if you really want to sell your business, it's going to take some work. It's not just like, hey, here's a number that we agreed upon. All right, write me a check. I mean, there's some serious work to verify all the information that you've given me as a potential seller.
Are you starting to notice a lot of like regional differences, just like in gutter companies in general? Like there's certain regions that just like you're trying to stay out of, like maybe Dallas.
You know, that's a great question. Our primary buy box is Western United States. So to be totally honest, I don't look at a lot of companies, you know, east of like Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
We try to stay in this western part of the United States. The reason being, if we do need to go, you know, handle some issue or some fire, we're one flight away. Now, that's not like a hard rule. We're actually looking at a couple companies in Florida right now.
Okay.
The biggest difference there being the weather is so much more conducive to good gutter companies than it is over here in a desert climate in Idaho.
You work all year round here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm envious of that. I mean, I'm a little hesitant to pull the trigger on a Florida company just because of how far away it is from Boise. But I mean, the reality is like it is. I mean, so much better weather-wise over there, and not only weather-wise, but like just the population that you guys have over there versus, you know, I think Idaho has like total of 1 million people or something in the whole state. You know,
Everyone moves here too.
Everyone wants to live in Florida. You know,
Yeah. No one retires in New York. You know,
definitely not Idaho.
Yeah, that's what we get a lot. That's been a lot of my business down here. Is just people moving in from, especially during COVID. Like everyone was flocking here. It was incredible.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like a vacation state. You know, so they kind of treat it that way. And then when they retire, they want to move here. And then the retirees usually have money. They sold their houses up north, and you know, so it's a great market for gutters for that reason. And then they come up from up north, and you know, they're used to having gutters in all the houses, and then down here, a lot of them just aren't built with them. Like the builders just kind of cheaped out, so they're like, "Oh, what's going on? I bought this house." You know, so you get a lot of new installs even on previously built homes because of that. So it's pretty good.
So it's not part of the local building code to full wrap gutters around the house.
No, it's more of like a county thing. So. Like there's a certain, not even a county thing, like a city thing. Because like I'm in Palm Beach County, but then like there's this one city that makes you do it over the AC unit, you know. So that's only a 10-foot section. So there's no one really making them do it for the sake of the foundation, which they should. But yeah, you know, there's other places that it's code, you know, and then they have, you know, everything has gutters. But then what they face is like they don't have any new installs unless something's getting built. It's all like tear down, replace. So it's just like a little different in every region.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, you know, we're just kind of used to the climate over here in Idaho, and so that's why we generally know how to work with the seasonality, and so we're really keen on similar markets to markets that we're already in. That's why we're really attracted to Denver and to Salt Lake and some of these areas over here. But yeah, I get envious of you guys over there in the east, the southeastern part of the United States.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's nice up here. I did some storm chasing. I went to different states going back like 15 years ago. I would go after like hail damage. Had like a traveling gutter company for a while.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I couldn't wait to move back to Florida. And I grew up in Florida, so I was always like, I'm gonna move away one day, and then no.
Now you're right back home.
Come back, you know.
No doubt, man.
So, how many companies you looking to get? Just as many as you can, or?
Yeah, so we've got some pretty ambitious goals, and now that we've been able to crack the code on raising a little bit of money to do this, we feel like we can really, really hit it hard and do this right. And so, what we're targeting is the next 5 to 7 years, sprinting really, really hard both in greenfielding markets and then obviously acquisitions as well.
Mhm.
But we're targeting somewhere in the 75 to $100 million range in total top line revenue.
Okay.
And we're confident that that'll give us the multiple that we want when we go to ultimately exit at the end of the day. So to get to 75 or 100 million in revenue, I mean, we're going to have to buy probably 20 or 30 companies along with growing them and greenfielding some markets. So we definitely need good owners, and we need good people around us. And so it's ambitious, but we're well on our way.
I think you'd be pretty good to answer this question because there's so many guys. I would say 65% of them of the industry is under $500,000 in revenue. So most of them are doing everything. As you've acquired these, have you 100% every time already had the management in place and it was just smooth transition and you didn't lose them? Or is there times where you had to put new management in place to run it because that kind of didn't work out or it didn't come with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it almost never always works out how we think it's going to. We kind of have a plan and then it doesn't always work out. Our ideal scenario is buying a company that already has a manager in place, but that manager needs to be willing to ebb and flow with our process, right? Because we're going to come in and we have a process that works. Yeah. So if you've been doing it one way, for a long time, like that's not going to work. And we do our best to keep our absolute best to keep the best parts of the employees on, because that's a big reason why we bought the company is the good employees. But when we come in and we make some changes, that we believe will improve the company, it doesn't always stick. The other thing we try to do is really get good at breeding leaders and managers in our own operation so that we can place them when necessary. But I'll be honest, Tim, like that's always one of the biggest challenges. It's a challenge to find someone who wants to sell and buy the company and get it at the right price and find the right company, but it is a challenge to find the right people to run them after that. I mean, we've been able to navigate it, but it's definitely one of the more challenging parts. And so for somebody who is at that $500,000 range and looking to scale to $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, you're probably not going to hire your manager right the first time. You're probably going to go through a couple of them. Mm-hmm. And it's not always, the person that started out as an installer that becomes a great manager. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you have to bring someone from the outside, though.
Yeah.
But that's an important piece. And if you can get someone around you and train that person really, really well, I'll be honest, it's way easier to train somebody when you have a system to train them on, and you're not just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. But you're probably not going to find that manager on the first go around, anyways. So you might as well bite the bullet and try it.
So would you say that it's because so many people just say, I can't find anyone. Do you think it's a hiring issue or do you think it's a training issue? And then you're hiring someone and then you fail them. They're not really failing you. And then it doesn't work.
So I don't believe that that whole notion of there's no good labor out there, I can't find anyone. I totally just disregard that. I don't believe that. What I believe is usually the main issue for companies is it all boils down to one simple thing. You're probably not charging enough for your product or service. Here's what I mean by that. If you can't charge enough to make a healthy profit, to be able to pay your people well, you are always going to be struggling with that same issue. So on the other side of that is if you will charge enough, you will charge what you're worth, you can actually create enough profit within your company where you can pay people well, where you can have a path for advancement for them. And the third, which I think is the most important part, you can get people bought into your vision and you can get people to understand that their goals and their dreams and aspirations can be fulfilled within the box of your company. Mm-hmm. If you can't get someone to believe that, hey, if you want to buy a house, if you want to get to that point where you're financially free, you can do that working for me, the turnover is going to be outrageous and it's going to be something that you'll deal with for the rest of your life. So I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but I believe the reason you can't find good labor is because you're not charging enough and you're not making enough profit to do so, and you can't get people to buy in to where you're going.
Yeah, I read this book called Profit First for Contractors, and that's what I was talking about. It's like you got to price yourself for what you need, not just what you have now. Like, so if you need an office manager, you need advertisement money, like all these things. That's got to be figured in your price so that you can afford it. Because if that's never figured in, you're just never going to afford those things.
Yeah, that's exactly. You're spinning your wheels constantly. It's an uphill battle, and look, it is the scariest thing for small business owners to raise prices, especially when you have repeat work from maybe another contractor who you rely on as a big chunk of your revenue. It is absolutely scary to raise prices in that scenario. But also, I would argue you should probably diversify where your revenues are coming from. So that's another thing that we look for in a company is,
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, do you have diversified revenue streams? I can't tell you how many companies we look at, Tim, that have 25, 50% of their revenue coming from maybe one large home builder or one large, roofer, for example. And it's like, man, if I come in there and I lose that relationship for some reason, I bought a worthless company. And so diversifying revenue streams is incredibly important as well. You guys do a great job within Gutter Growth of really helping people understand how to market properly and effectively. And I think that that's a really undervalued piece of the business, is being able to not rely on other contractors for your work, but owning that revenue pipeline and going directly to homeowners for the retrofit market. That's something that we stress all the time.
They say that only like 10% of people like marketing, but I love it. But I mean, like, really, I can't believe it's only 10%, because like that is the task that's going to make you money. Like, that's where your focus should be. It should be like 90% focus there, period,
But it's so counterintuitive because we're gutter guys, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe you grew up installing gutters. You think of yourself like your craft is gutters. But what you don't recognize is most companies are sales and marketing organizations disguised as home services. And so you have to learn that marketing piece in order to grow where you want to go. It just so happens you install gutters and you're probably really good at it, but you have to be able to effectively market.
And then I don't know if this was right or wrong, but this was just kind of the rule of thumb that I had, or for myself. I was around during like the Great Recession time, and I've seen so many companies that were heavily reliant on contractors just go under. Like, the contractors didn't get paid, or whatever happened. They didn't get paid. Now they're out of business. And there's so many people that had like 80% contractors. Because of that, I never let myself get more than 20 to 25% contractors, and I was resting to retail. I just had more control over it, I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big piece of what we look at.
Is there a certain number that you're looking at as far as ratio goes?
There's not a certain number, but I'll tell you, if a company's super heavy into new construction, we pass on it immediately. Specifically new construction. We're okay if a company has large amounts of revenues coming from, a diversified group of roofers, for example, because those are generally retrofit roofing jobs. But the new construction is where, especially right now, we've seen a slowdown mostly across the country in new construction.
Okay.
Maybe not in Southeast Florida as much as some of the other areas, but so we've seen a lot of gutter companies where their year-to-date numbers are down tremendously from 2022, 23, and 24. And so, a lot of them is because primarily they have heavy revenues coming from new construction.
So now it's hitting them.
Now it's hitting them. That's exactly right. And the other piece to that is new construction contractors, they're always price shopping, and then they're always slow to pay. So it puts a huge strain on cash flow. So if a company's really heavy into new construction, we almost pass on it immediately.
Let me ask you, because we haven't touched on the subject, branding. How important is branding and just the look of the company and the feel and the website? How important is all of that to your decision on this is a company I would want? We
actually prefer that a company's not branded well, because we know that if it's only because the value add though, Tim. I mean, it's if a company's not branded well and they're still doing 2 million in revenue and we can come in and brand it well, we know that we can, 2x that company. So it's super important for us internally. We've done so much testing with this.
But it just shows how well branding works, because you're just going to come in and do what they should have been doing.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we like, man, it's like, that's the lowest hanging fruit. So many companies, they don't have a website or their website doesn't work. Their trucks aren't wrapped. There's no, uniqueness to their brand or their logo. And we know that as we make those tweaks, we're going to be so much more effective in that company. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to come in and like change the name, because typically companies we're buying are 10, 20, 30 years old. They have really good name recognition in the market that they're in, but we definitely will come in and improve, enhance the branding around it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you want to sell your company for more, get good branding now. And your revenue, your profits, your click-through rates, your marketing costs, everything's going to improve with good branding.
So let me ask you, there's a lot of people that might be considering selling. I hear it all the time, guys getting in their late 50s, 60s, ready to get out. They've been in 20, 30 years. First off, what type of company do you want to contact you? And then how can they contact you?
Yeah. So look, I would say if anybody's even remotely interested, or even just interested in what the process looks like no strings attached, reach out to me. I would love to help, even if you're 5 years out from selling. I'd love to kind of help guide you on how that might look and how to best prepare for it. So companies of any size, reach out to us, because even if maybe you're a little small, for us to be the only purchase in your market, we may be looking at other companies in your market, and we may still want to look at an acquisition. So companies of any size, reach out. If it's not a fit, I'll direct you as to why it's not a fit, and offer as much help and guidance as I can as to what maybe you can do for somebody else, so that it might be a fit. And then just Jordan@bluebirdcapitalfund.com is my email. I'm happy to consult, jump on a call, whatever anybody might need. Or if you have any other questions, I love having these conversations, super passionate about it. So even if it doesn't go anywhere and we're not going to acquire your company, I would love to have conversation with you.
And it sounds like you're probably going to be buying companies for several years down the road here. I read the book Built to Sell 5 years before I sold, and I didn't really even have plans of selling necessarily. But what I liked about that book is it pretty much taught you why you need to build a business that is sellable. Because the same business that is sellable is also kind of the same model that's scalable. So you kind of need to do these things any ways to scale. So yeah, man, appreciate you coming on today.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me on, Sam. It's been great.
Good deal, man. You have a good day.
All right. We'll see you. Bye.